Hello, everyone, and welcome to the thru Recovery Life Podcast. This was written by John A., West Palm Beach, Florida, using the outline from the Back to Basics book by Wally P. We're going to start off with a quote by Albert Einstein. If you cannot explain it simply, you don't understand it well enough. In this session, we're doing the 12 Steps to Freedom workshop, where we will go through the 12 steps in less than 4 hours. This video will cover steps 1 through 6, and video number 2 will cover steps 7 through 12. We will still have some live events on Zoom in the future, but for all intents and purposes, we have moved our workshops to the podcast platform to make them available to more people. You can visit our website at thezooCrew.org, thezooCrew.org. Please feel free to like this video and subscribe to our channel so you can be notified when we upload new videos. Feel free to comment and share this video with others in recovery or looking to get sober. Let's start with a moment of silence to reflect on what we're about to do here today, followed by the Serenity Prayer. God, grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, the courage to change the things that I can, and the wisdom to know the difference. You could be doing anything else right now, but instead you're listening to our recovery podcast. We're happy to have you here making this investment in your sobriety. You are making a huge deposit into your IRA, your individual recovery account, by being here and participating. Keep making these deposits no matter how small, because one day you may have a situation that will require you to make a huge withdrawal, and you don't want your IRA to be depleted. We will be using the big book and the 12 and 12 to go through the 12 steps, and we will be sharing our experience, strength, and hope with you on the 12 steps to help us all get a better understanding of the steps and how to apply them in our life. This is from page 15 of the 12 and 12. AA's 12 steps are a group of principles, spiritual in their nature, which, if practiced as a way of life, can expel the obsession to drink and enable the sufferer to become happily and usefully whole. You might be thinking that it's impossible to go through the 12 steps in just 4 hours or less. Actually, it's not impossible. In fact, that's how they did it in the early days of AA. And this is from the Big Book on page 263. It was Dr. Bob's afternoon off. He had me to the office, and we spent 3 or 4 hours formally going through the 6-step program as it was at that time. The 6 steps were: 1. Complete deflation; 2. Dependence and guidance from a higher power; 3. Moral inventory; 4. Confession; 5. Restitution; 6. Continued work with other alcoholics. Dr. Bob led me through all these steps. At the moral inventory, he brought up several of my bad personality traits or character defects, such as selfishness, conceit, jealousy, carelessness, intolerance, ill temper, sarcasm, and resentments. We went over these at great length, and then he finally asked me if I wanted these defects of character removed. When I said yes, we both knelt at his desk and prayed, each of us asking to have these defects taken away. There were only 6 steps at that time, and Bill expanded them into 12 steps when he wrote the Big Book. But those 6 steps still encompassed all of the principles of our current 12 steps. A prospect couldn't even attend an AA meeting until he had taken the steps back then. He didn't even know where the meetings were held at that time until someone sponsored him into the AA meeting. And I'm not going to say that AA was more effective then as opposed to now, but I will say that people are dying needlessly because they are procrastinating in taking the 12 steps. Even if they're not dying, they are suffering longer than they need to. How soon do you want to be happy, joyous, and free? If your house was on fire, you would have a sense of urgency to get that fire out. If you had a life-threatening disease, you would have a sense of urgency in getting on the path to recovery. Freedom from the obsession of alcohol comes in taking the 12 steps. Your life is in danger. Have a sense of urgency in taking the 12 steps and having them become a way of life for you sooner than later. That feeling of being happy, joyous, and free comes from taking the 12 steps. The steps help us work on the underlying issues behind alcoholism. If alcohol was the problem, most of us would be cured by now. Do you want to know how to get in a position of neutrality and get a great defense against that first sucker drink? It is through the 12 steps of AA. Quitting drinking is easy as pie. Anyone can quit drinking. Everyone listening to this podcast has quit drinking at some point in time prior to coming into AA. The problem is staying stopped. And that's where AA and the 12 steps come into play. If alcohol was the problem, treatment centers would have a 99.9% success rate. You can go to jail for a weekend and stop drinking. Again, everyone in here has stopped drinking even before coming into AA, but they could not stay stopped. Even if it was for an hour, half a day, or perhaps a week, you had stopped, but you didn't know how to stay stopped. In AA, we're able to stay stopped one day at a time. And by taking the 12 steps and practicing the principles behind the steps, we become someone who no longer needs to drink. The key to staying stopped is not to pick up the first drink. It's a fact that we are all one drink away from a drunk. The goal for today is to get you 12 plus steps away from that first sucker drink. And if you listen to our whole podcast, our whole workshop on the 12 steps, you'll have taken all the steps except steps 4, 5, 8, and 9. You'll get a cursory knowledge of those steps, but you will need to get someone to help you with those steps. Again, that's steps 4, 5, 8, and 9. You can be on step 9 within a few days. And before going any further, I have a few questions I'd like each person to answer. Are you willing to go to any lengths to get sober and stay sober? Yes or no? Do you want to be happy, joyous, and free? Yes or no? And if you have decided you want what we have and are willing to go to any lengths to get it, then you are ready to take certain steps. And this brings us to step 1. Step 1. We admitted we were powerless over alcohol, that our lives had become unmanageable. If you're able to, I'd like you to stand up with your big book in your hand. Please stand if you can. Now drop or put the big book on the floor. And please remain standing till we finish reading the following paragraph. Big book, page 25. There is a solution. Almost none of us like the self-searching, the leveling of our pride, the confession of shortcomings, which the process requires for its successful consummation. But we saw that it really worked in others, and we had come to believe in the hopelessness and futility of life as we had been living it. When, therefore, we were approached by those in whom the problem had been solved, there was nothing left for us to do but to pick up the simple kit of spiritual tools laid at our feet. We had found much of heaven, and we have been rocketed into a fourth dimension of existence, of which we had not even dreamed. So now, please pick up your big book, which contains the simple kit of spiritual tools laid at our feet, and sit down. Big book, page 24. The fact is that most alcoholics, for reasons yet obscure, have lost the power of choice in drink. Our so-called willpower becomes practically non-existent. We were unable at certain times to bring into our consciousness with sufficient force the memory of the suffering and humiliation of even a week or a month ago. We were without defense against the first drink. What you can do is split the first step into 2 parts. Look at the first part as admitting that you were powerless over alcohol, and the second part, that your life had become unmanageable. Focus on the first part until you are comfortable in saying that you are powerless over alcohol and that you believe it when you say it. Then take the time to look at your life and experiences with an aerial view so that you can see the big picture of how unmanageable your life was. And there is absolutely no action taken on steps 1, 2, or 3. There is nothing to write until you get to step 4. You may choose to do some writing if you want to, or if your sponsor suggests that you do. There are even worksheets on the internet for steps 1, 2, and 3. And this is from the Big Book, page 30. We learned that we had to fully concede to our innermost selves that we were alcoholics. This is the first step in recovery. 12 and 12, page 21. We perceive that only through utter defeat are we able to take our first steps toward liberation and strength. Our admissions of personal powerlessness finally turn out to be firm bedrock upon which happy and purposeful lives may be built. The doctor's opinion will show you how you are powerless over alcohol and also why you drank if you're an alcoholic. And this is from the doctor's opinion in the front of the Big Book. Men and women drink essentially because they like the effect produced by alcohol. The sensation is so elusive that, while they admit it is injurious, they cannot after a time differentiate the true from the false. To them, their alcoholic life seems the only normal one. They are restless, irritable, and discontented unless they can again experience the sense of ease and comfort which comes at once by taking a few drinks. Drinks which they see others taking with impunity. After they have succumbed to the desire again, as so many do, and the phenomenon of craving develops, they pass through the well-known stages of a spree, emerging remorseful with a firm resolution not to drink again. This is repeated over and over, and unless this person can experience an entire psychic change, there is very little hope of his recovery. So what you can extrapolate from that is, you don't crave alcohol until you've had that first drink. Prior to having that first drink, it is an obsession of the mind. And we're going to look at one or two myths about step 1. The first myth is that powerlessness means you're weak. That is not true. Admitting powerlessness is a crucial step on the pathway to independence and strength. It requires honesty and courage to accept that alcohol had taken over your life. The second myth, or another myth, is you have to hit rock bottom before you're able to find support. That's not true. It does not require a major life event to open your eyes to your alcoholism or developing alcoholism. Sometimes all it requires is a realization that alcohol is causing you more pain than the pain you aim to escape from. And you can download a pamphlet from the internet, and it'll have 12 questions you can answer for yourself. Just do a Google search for, is AA for you? Is AA for you? And answer those 12 questions if you have any reservations about being an alcoholic. And here's an example of, in boxing, a fighter loses when his corner throws in the towel and quits. In AA, we win when we throw in the towel and quit or surrender. Prior to AA and the 12 steps, we were totally powerless over that first sucker drink. And once we took that first drink, we were powerless to stop until we got that buzz. It doesn't matter how long you drank or how much you drank. We thought alcohol was the solution before we came into AA, but alcohol was a temporary solution. Through Alcoholics Anonymous, you can find a permanent solution and a true higher power. More about alcoholism on page 30 of the Big Book. Most of us have been unwilling to admit we were real alcoholics. No person likes to think he is bodily and mentally different from his fellows. Therefore, it is not surprising that our drinking careers have been characterized by countless vain attempts to prove we could drink like other people. The idea that somehow, someday, he will control and enjoy his drinking is the great obsession of every abnormal drinker. The persistence of this illusion is astonishing. Many pursue it into the gates of insanity or death. We learned that we had to fully concede to our innermost selves that we were alcoholics. This is the first step in recovery. The delusion that we are like other people, or presently may be, has to be smashed. We alcoholics are men and women who have lost the ability to control our drinking. We know that no real alcoholic ever recovers control. All of us felt at times that we were regaining control, but such intervals, usually brief, were inevitably followed by still less control, which led in time to pitiful and incomprehensible demoralization. We are convinced to a man that alcoholics of our type are in the grip of a progressive illness. Over any considerable period of time, we get worse, never better. So, are you ready to concede to your innermost self that you are an alcoholic? Yes or no? Do you have any reservations whatsoever about being an alcoholic? Yes or no? So, if you have conceded that you're an alcoholic and have no reservations about being an alcoholic, then you have just taken step 1. And now we're moving on to step 2. Step 2. Came to believe that a power greater than ourselves could restore us to sanity. Some members of AA will immediately bring up God when the subject of step 2 comes up. Step 2 isn't about believing or not believing in a God. We don't have to immediately start talking about God when this step comes up. The newcomer can be spoon-fed the God talk. Step 2 talks about coming to believe in a power greater than yourself. That power can be anything you choose. And this is from the 12 and 12, page 26. First, Alcoholics Anonymous does not demand that you believe anything. All of its 12 steps are but suggestions. Second, to get sober and to stay sober, you don't have to swallow all of step 2 right now. Looking back, I find that I took it piecemeal myself. And third, all you really need is a truly open mind. Just resign from the debating society and quit bothering yourself with such deep questions as whether it was the hen or the egg that came first. Again, I say, all you need is an open mind. Big Book, page 46. We found that as soon as we were able to lay aside prejudice and express even a willingness to believe in a power greater than ourselves, we commenced to get results. And even though it was impossible for any of us to fully define or comprehend that power, which is God. Big Book, page 46 again. Much to our relief, we discovered we did not need to consider another's conception of God. Our conception, however inadequate, was sufficient to make the approach and to effect a contact with Him. As soon as we admitted the possible existence of a creative intelligence, a spirit of the universe, a spirit of the universe underlying the totality of things, we began to be possessed of a new sense of power and direction, provided we took other simple steps. We found that God does not make too hard terms with those who seek Him. Big Book, page 47. When, therefore, we speak to you of God, we mean your own conception of God. This applies too to other spiritual expressions which you find in this book. Do not let any prejudice you may have against spiritual terms deter you from honestly asking yourself what they mean to you. Big Book, page 45. Lack of power was our dilemma. We had to find a power by which we could live, and it had to be a power greater than ourselves. Big Book, page 55. Deep down in every man, woman, and child is the fundamental idea of God. It may be obscured by calamity, by pomp, by worship of other things, but in some form or other it is there. For faith in a power greater than ourselves and miraculous demonstrations of that power in human lives are facts as old as man himself. Big Book, page 47. We needed to ask ourselves but one short question. Do I now believe, or am I even willing to believe, that there is a power greater than myself? As soon as a man can say that he does believe, or is willing to believe, we emphatically assure him that he is on his way. It has been repeatedly proven among us that upon this simple cornerstone, a wonderfully effective spiritual structure can be built. Let me ask you, do you believe, or are you even willing to believe, that there is a power greater than yourself? And again, that power can be anything at all. Just answer yes or no. And if you answered yes to the question, then you have just taken step 2. And this brings us to step 3. Step 3. Made a decision to turn our will and our lives over to the care of God as we understood Him. Our description of the alcoholic, the chapter to the agnostic, and our personal adventures before and after make clear 3 pertinent ideas. A, that we were alcoholic and could not manage our own lives. B, that probably no human power could have relieved our alcoholism. And C, that God could and would if He were sought. The ABCs of the AA program sum up steps 1 and 2. Step 1, if you are convinced that you're an alcoholic and that your life was unmanageable, and that means without any reservations. Step 2, if you are convinced that a power greater than yourself can help you, then, and that's the ABCs of the program. This is the Big Book, page 60. Being convinced, we were at step 3, which is that we decided to turn our will and our life over to God as we understood Him. Just what do we mean by that? And just what do we do? Big Book, page 60. The first requirement is that we be convinced that any life run on self-will can hardly be a success. On that basis, we are almost always in collision with something or somebody, even though our motives are good. Most people try to live by self-propulsion. Each person is like an actor who wants to run the whole show, is forever trying to arrange the lights, the ballet, the scenery, and the rest of the players in his own way. 12 and 12, page 34. Practicing step 3 is like the opening of a door, which to all appearances is still locked and closed. All we need is a key and the decision to swing the door open. There is only one key, and it is called willingness. Once unlocked by willingness, the door opens almost of itself, and looking through it, we shall see a pathway beside which is an inscription. It reads, "This is the way to a faith that works." In the first 2 steps, we were engaged in reflection. We saw that we were powerless over alcohol, but we also perceived that that faith of some kind, if only in AA itself, is possible to anyone. These conclusions did not require action. They required only acceptance. And one of the key words in step 3 is decision. There is absolutely no action taken, nor is any type of action necessary for completion of step 3. The actions come in the subsequent steps. Here's an example. If 2 birds are on a power line and one of them decides to fly off, how many are left? You still have 2 left on the power line. All one of them did was decide to fly off. It didn't actually fly off. And after making the decision to turn our will, which is our thoughts, and our lives, which is our actions, to the care of God, absolutely nothing happens until and unless it is followed by action. Steps 1, 2, and 3 pave the way for the willingness to come to make the decision to turn our will and our lives over to the or to change our thoughts and actions. Steps 4 through 9 show us how to make the change happen, as well as removing the character defects that prevent us from doing it. Steps 10, 11, and 12 help us keep our will and our lives in His care, which brings us to another key word in step 3, which is care. You're not turning your will and life over to God. You are turning them over to His care. We have free will to do whatever we want. And the longer you are sober, you will find that the things you want to do have changed. The path will get narrower. You will do the right thing in life because you want to. You may not always know what the right thing to do is in a situation, but you always know what the wrong thing to do is. And this is from the 12 and 12, pages 34, 35. Like all the remaining steps, step 3 calls for affirmative action, for it is only by action that we can cut away the self-will which has blocked the entry of God, or if you like, a higher power, into our lives. Faith, to be sure, is necessary, but faith alone can avail nothing. We can have faith, yet keep God out of our lives. Therefore, our problem now becomes just how and by what specific means shall we be able to let Him in. Step 3 represents our first attempt to do this. In fact, the effectiveness of the whole AA program will rest upon how well and earnestly we have tried to come to a decision to turn our will and our lives over to the care of God as we understood Him. And this is from the Big Book, page 62. First of all, we had to quit playing God. It didn't work. Next, we decided that hereafter, in this drama of life, God was going to be our director. He is the principal, we are His agents. He is the Father, and we are His children. Most good ideas are simple, and this concept was the keystone of the new and triumphant arch through which we passed to freedom. Big Book, page 63. We were now at step 3. Many of us said to our Maker, as we understood Him, God, I offer myself to Thee, to build with me and to do with me as Thou wilt. Relieve me of the bondage of self, that I may better do Thy will. Take away my difficulties, that victory over them may bear witness to those I would help of Thy power, Thy love, and Thy way of life. May I do Thy will always. We thought well before taking this step, making sure we were ready, that we could at last abandon ourselves utterly to Him. And many call this the third step prayer. Big Book, page 63. We found it very desirable to take this spiritual step with an understanding person, such as our wife, best friend, or spiritual advisor. But it is better to meet God alone than with one who might misunderstand. The wording was, of course, quite optional, so long as we expressed the idea, voicing it without reservation. This was only a beginning, though if honestly and humbly made, an effect, sometimes a very great one, was felt at once. And please, do not let the God word stop you from taking this step. Your God or higher power can be whatever or whoever you choose. You can customize your God to your specifications. And some AA members say they do steps 1, 2, and 3 every day. Some say they surrender every day. Others say they've only done steps 1, 2, and 3 once, and they are no longer in a state of surrender. Some members say they are still powerless over alcohol, even after years of sobriety. Others say they are no longer powerless. They are in a position of neutrality. You can customize this AA program to your specifications, and whatever works for you, that will help you remain sober for the rest of your life, one day at a time. And again, step 3 is about the God of your understanding. Please do not get hung up on the God word. God can stand for a group of drunks, grow or die, greatest of daddies, or anything you want. You don't even have to use the God word. Just call it your higher power or your HP. You can have your own conception of God and not that of your parents. You don't need to keep the God that you grew up with. You can now customize your God just as you would customize a computer to your specifications. And what I suggest is get out a sheet of paper and put 2 columns. The column on your left is what you don't want in your God. The column on the right is what you do want in your God, your higher power. And that right column can be your God. It's really that simple. AA will help you plug into the power of your God or your higher power. Here's an example. If you're in a room right now, it is full of power outlets, but if you don't plug in, you won't get the power. The third step helps you find the power outlet and plug in. The rest of the steps clear the path to the power, as well as staying plugged into the power source. Interdependence. What does interdependence mean? Well, you will get more independence by being dependent on your higher power. For most people in this meeting, alcohol was their God, their higher power, their HP. For most people listening to this podcast, alcohol was their crutch in life. Alcohol, however, was a temporary solution. You now have a long-term, permanent solution in AA and your higher power. You can lean on them for strength and support. In step 3, you will begin to see how your higher power was looking out over you your whole life. You can't see how your higher power was looking out over you your whole life? That they were with you your whole life? Think about the times that you should have died. Think about the times that you should have been arrested. Think about the times that something horrible should have happened, but it didn't go as badly as it should have or could have gone. That was your higher power looking out over you. You will begin to see that everything happens in your life for a reason, whether it's good, bad, or indifferent. It's okay to have faith and fear simultaneously, because courage is not the absence of fear. Courage is having fear, but going forward anyway. You don't even have to believe in God. Again, your HP can be anything you want. You can even be an atheist and still get sober and become happy, joyous, and free. The bottom line is that AA works if you believe in God. It works if you don't believe in God. The only way it will not work is if you think you are God. Are you ready to turn your will and your life over to the care of God, the God of your understanding? Yes or no? Are you ready to do the right thing in your life from now on, one day at a time? Yes or no? If you have answered yes, let's say the third step prayer together. God, I offer myself to Thee to build with me and to do with me as Thou wilt. Relieve me of the bondage of self, that I may better do Thy will. Take away my difficulties, that victory over them may bear witness to those I would help of Thy power, Thy love, and Thy way of life. May I do Thy will always. If you answered yes to the questions, then you have just taken step 3. And this brings us to step 4. Step 4. Made a searching and fearless moral inventory of ourselves. How soon should you start step 4 after you've done step 3? Well, let's see what the founding fathers of AA had to say on that topic. Big Book pages 63-64. Next, we launched out on a course of vigorous action, the first step of which is a personal house cleaning, which many of us had never attempted. Though our decision was a vital and crucial step, it could have little permanent effect unless at once followed by a strenuous effort to face and to be rid of the things in ourselves which had been blocking us. Our liquor was but a symptom, so we had to get down to causes and conditions. So I take that to mean I take that to mean you can start doing step 4 immediately after doing step 3. And why do you need to do a fourth step? The thing is, you won't know what to fix if you don't know what's broken. You don't know what it is about you that needs to be changed, and you won't know what your assets and liabilities are if you don't take an inventory. Big Book, pages 63, 64. A business which takes no regular inventory usually goes broke. Taking commercial inventory is a fact-finding and fact-facing process. It is an effort to discover the truth about the stock in trade. One object is to disclose damaged or unsellable goods, to get rid of them promptly and without regret. If the owner of the business is to be successful, he cannot fool himself about values. We did exactly the same thing with our lives. We took stock honestly. First, we searched out the flaws in our makeup which caused our failure. Being convinced that self, manifested in various ways, was what had defeated us, we considered its common manifestations. Steps 4 and 5 will help you uncover, discover, and then discard troubling facts from the past. The past will no longer have power over you. You will learn your part in many situations from your past. The bottom line is to no longer be a victim of those incidents of the past, of the traumas of the past. And there is nothing wrong with seeking outside help if it's required. 12 and 12, page 42. Nearly every serious emotional problem can be seen as a case of misdirected instinct. When that happens, our great natural assets, the instincts, have turned into physical and mental liabilities. Step 4 is our vigorous and painstaking effort to discover what these liabilities in each of us have been and are. And there is no right or wrong way to do a fourth step. Just do it. Don't waste precious time trying to do a perfect fourth step. There are various fourth step worksheets available online. The Big Book suggests that we write out the fourth step. You shouldn't type it out and email it to your sponsor. Big Book, page 64. We set them on paper. We listed people. Big Book, page 65. Our grudge list, on our grudge list, we set opposite each name our injuries. Was it our self-esteem, our security, our ambitions, our personal or sex relations which had been interfered with? And if you keep the fourth step simple, you can complete it in just a few hours. You do not have to go back to kindergarten, and you don't have to dig that deep to find your resentments. Put down the things that keep you up at night, or the stuff that you think about as soon as you wake up. It's not the things that you don't remember to write in your fourth step that will take you out. It's the things that you do remember, but do not write down, that may take you out. Big Book, page 65. We went back through our lives. Nothing counted but thoroughness and honesty. And you'll never be done with these steps anyway. If you forget anything in this or any other step, you can do it in step 10. And also remember that the fourth step is just notes for when you do your fifth step. The fourth step is the beginning of the process to help us have that profound personality change which enables us to become someone who doesn't need to drink anymore, who does not need to drink anymore. As I've stated, this is not an easy step to do. Who the heck wants to peel away layers upon layers of negative, bad, terrible, horrible things about themselves? Nobody wants to do this, but we must do it if we are to change. The fourth step goes against every self-preservation fiber of our being, but we must do it if we are to change. We must do it if we want to survive. And if you trust the process, great things will happen. There are 4 inventories we should be writing as part of the fourth step: resentments, fears, sex, and harms to others. I think it is a longer path if you do the fourth step in the form of a life story. The fourth step should be mainly notes and short phrases that will help you when you do your fifth step. However, there is no right or wrong way to do this step. Just do it. Here's a joke for you. Do you know how long it takes some people to do a fourth step? It takes about 5 months. 5 months worrying about it and thinking about it, and a few hours to just do it. The fourth step is all about bringing these lingering fears, worries, shames, and elements of anger to the surface for an honest examination. The goal of ridding ourselves of these harmful pieces of our emotional and mental lives makes this process very worthwhile indeed. The biggest challenge for those engaging in a fourth step is relinquishing the notion of righteous anger, justifications for their harmful actions, or rationalizations that minimize the harms caused. What we desire above all is honesty, thoroughness, and a completely critical look at ourselves, which refuses to excuse the harms that we may have caused to ourselves or others. The fourth step is the beginning of the healing process. This is also where we start working on the underlying issues behind our alcoholism. After a while, the past will no longer have power over you that it did previously. You will start feeling happy, joyous, and free. You will get freedom from the past. You will start forgiving yourself and others. You will start seeing things as they really are and not how you perceive them. Big Book, page 70. Suppose we fall short of the chosen ideal and stumble. Does this mean we are going to get drunk? Some people tell us so, but this is only a half-truth. It depends on us and on our motives. If we are sorry for what we have done and have the honest desire to let God take us to better things, we believe we will be forgiven and we will have learned our lesson. If we are not sorry and our conduct continues to harm others, we are quite sure to drink. We are not theorizing. These are facts out of our experience. And this brings us to step 5. Step 5. Admit it to God, to ourselves, and to another human being the exact nature of our wrongs. Big Book, page 72. Having made our personal inventory, what shall we do about it? We have been trying to get a new attitude, a new relationship with our Creator, and to discover the obstacles in our path. We have admitted certain defects. We have ascertained in a rough way what the trouble is. We have put our finger on the weak items in our personal inventory. Now these are about to be cast out. This requires action on our part, which, when completed, will mean that we have admitted to God, to ourselves, and to another human being the exact nature of our defects. This brings us to the 5th step in the program of recovery mentioned in the preceding chapter. So why is it so important to do a 5th step with someone else? Well, you can decide for yourself. This is what it says on page 72 of the Big Book. If we skip this vital step, we may not overcome drinking. Time after time, newcomers have tried to keep to themselves certain facts about their lives. Trying to avoid this humbling experience, they have turned to easier methods. Almost invariably, they got drunk. Having persevered with the rest of the program, they wondered why they fell. We think the reason is that they never completed their house cleaning. They took inventory, all right, but hung on to some of the worst items in stock. They only thought they had lost their egoism and fear. They only thought they had humbled themselves, but they had not learned enough of humility, fearlessness, and honesty in the sense we find it necessary until they told someone else all their life story. In Alcoholics Anonymous, we say that we are as sick as our deepest, darkest secrets. It's best to make your life an open book. And the 12 steps of AA are fashioned in such a manner as to bring about a profound personality change, which will lead to the drink problem being removed from us. Again, alcohol was not the problem, never was the problem. And once alcohol has been removed from the equation, we must deal with the real problem, ourselves and our character defects, and become a person who no longer needs to drink. The fourth step was the beginning of the process to allow us to change. The fifth and subsequent steps continue helping with the changing process. And why does the fifth step work? Is it something new that AA and Bill Wilson stumbled upon? Not really. The concept of the fifth step has been in use for centuries. Confession of our sins is something that many religions employ. And it's probably true that women live longer than men because of kitchen table psychology. Many women will tell another one everything that goes on in her life and will seek counsel from her friends at different times. This is the same method that AA uses to help us make our lives an open book. And here are some benefits of doing the fifth step. We're going to find out that we're not unique, we're not alone. We're going to gain freedom from the past. We're going to gain freedom from being found out. Forgiveness. We're going to forgive ourselves and others. We begin to see things as they are and not as we perceive them. We gain peace of mind and serenity and true humility. Big Book, page 75. We pocket our pride and go to it, illuminating every twist of character, every dark cranny of the past. Once we have taken this step, withholding nothing, we are delighted. We can look the world in the eye. We can be alone at perfect peace and ease. Our fears fall from us. We begin to feel the nearness of our Creator. We may have had certain spiritual beliefs, but now we begin to have a spiritual experience. The feeling that the drink problem has disappeared will often come strongly. We feel we're on the broad highway, walking hand in hand with the spirit of the universe. And here's a word of caution. Be careful with whom you do your fifth step, because there is no legal privilege, implied or otherwise, unless you do it with a lawyer or a priest. And even then, there are certain crimes that they are obligated to report if you tell them. However, the AA program is all about growing up and accepting responsibility for our actions. In the words of Dr. Bob, trust God, clean house, help others. And this is from the 12 and 12, pages 60-61. Our next problem will be to discover the person in whom we are to confide. Here we ought to take much care, remembering that prudence is a virtue which carries a high rating. Perhaps we shall need to share with this person facts about ourselves which no others ought to know. We shall want to speak with someone who is experienced, who not only has stayed dry, but has been able to surmount other serious difficulties. Big Book, page 74. Rightly and naturally, we think well before we choose this person or persons with whom to take this intimate and confidential step. Those of us belonging to a religious denomination which requires confession must, and of course will want to go to the properly appointed authority whose duty it is to receive it. Though we have no religious connection, we may still want to talk with someone ordained by an established religion. We often find such a person quick to see and understand our problem. Of course, we sometimes encounter people who do not understand alcoholics. If we cannot or would rather not do this, we search our acquaintance for a closed-mouthed, understanding friend. Perhaps our doctor or psychologist will be the person. It may be one of our own family, but we cannot disclose anything to our wives or our parents which will hurt them and make them unhappy. We have no right to save our own skin at another person's expense. And this brings us to step 6. Step 6. We're entirely ready to have God remove all these defects of character. 12 and 12, page 46. We don't just focus on the bad character traits, because there is some good and bad in all of us. The sponsor probably points out that the newcomer has some assets which can be noted along with his liabilities. This tends to clear away morbidity and encourage balance. As soon as he begins to be more objective, the newcomer can fearlessly, rather than fearfully, look at his own defects. And for starters, there is absolutely no difference between a character defect and a shortcoming. Bill Wilson was asked why he chose different words in those two steps, and he said that he just didn't want to end the sentences with the same words. 12 and 12, page 63. This is the step that separates the men from the boys. Big Book, page 64. Our liquor was but a symptom, so we had to get down to causes and conditions. Big Book, page 76. We have emphasized willingness as being indispensable. Are we now ready to let God remove from us all the things which we have admitted are objectionable? Can He now take them all, everyone? If we still cling to something we will not let go, we ask God to help us to be willing. And here are just some of some character defects along with their opposites. So if you're selfish, you want to become unselfish. If you're dishonest, you want to become honest. If you're resentful, you want to be forgiving. If you're afraid, you want to have faith. If you're arrogant, you want to become humble. If you're egotistical, you want to be modest. If you're cocky, you want to be mild. If you're envious, you want to be grateful. If you're gluttonous, you want to be sharing. If you're impatient, you want patience. If you're vengeful, you want to be loving. If you're hurtful, you want to be kind. If you're sarcastic, you want to be complimentary. Go to our website at thru.org and you can download or click on this link to get the character defects and their total opposites. And this is from the 12 and 12, page 65. So step 6, we're entirely ready to have God remove all these defects of character, is AA's way of stating the best possible attitude one can take in order to make a beginning on this lifetime job. This does not mean that we expect all our character defects to be lifted out of us as the drive to drink was. A few of them may be, but with most of them, we shall have to be content with patient improvement. The key words entirely ready underline the fact that we want to aim at the very best we know or can learn. Do you acknowledge that you have character defects you need to work on? Yes or no? Are you ready to start working on your character defects with the help of your higher power? Yes or no? Okay, and this concludes the first part of our 12 steps to freedom, where we go through the 12 steps in less than 4 hours. This video contained steps 1 through 6, and the second video will contain steps 7 through 12. Thank you very much for listening to the Zoo Crew Recovery Life podcast, titled The 12 Steps to Freedom. Again, where we go through the 12 steps in less than 4 hours. This was written by John A., myself, in West Palm Beach, Florida, using the outline from the book Back to Basics book by Wally P. My sobriety date is September 13th of 1982. You can go to our website at thezooCrew.org, thezooCrew.org. Please feel free to like this video and subscribe to our channel so you can be notified when we upload new videos. Feel free to comment and share this video with others in recovery or looking to get sober. Thank you very much.